Hello, everybody. I know this is going to take a couple of minutes for people to join. So Stephen and I will probably do a bit of filling to begin with. That's all right. He's just said he's in a really good mood, and I'm not going to ask why, but it's Friday. And I'm sure that's the same with everybody, isn't it? It's Friday. It's the end of the week. How's your week been, Stephen?
It's been great. Really, really, really good week. I have been, you'll appreciate this, and there's a bit of filler, doing some heart work in the last couple of weeks. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. So yeah, we're talking about head today, aren't we? But
yes.
Yeah, it's been a really good week.
But actually, I think I'm pleased that you mentioned that, because so Steve and I both do meditation, and I would highly recommend it to anybody that is watching that hasn't tried it. And you recommended this really good heart alignment meditation, I think it's called, because I think a lot of the time we can close that part of our bodies off and don't let that filter into our decision making as well at times. And it's really, I've tried it, I've done it a few times, and it's really powerful. Actually, it's really opened up a lot for me. So let's just crack on, shall we? So Stephen and I know each other through another connection, and he is one of those coaches and people that I have met who have had actually a really quite profound impact on me in this online business world, for the simple reason that, Stephen, you're so genuine. There is no pretenses about you, but in a good way. And you're generally a really good person to have around, but also you're a really good coach as well. And I really rate that about you. So I asked Stephen on to do this interview chat, really, to share our knowledge on a lot of different topics. The predominant one being how to get out of your head as well, which we just talked about, which has obviously several different meanings. But the way we're looking at it is, I'm a massive overthinker. I know you are as well, Stephen. But how do you cope with that? And how do you cope with limiting beliefs when they come up? And how to basically move yourself forward from that, make the change that you want as well. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and Stephen, please do introduce yourself to people that don't know you. I'd love to hear from your perspective what that is.
That's so generous of you, by the way, that introduction. Thank you very much. And so I am a professional coach. I am based in a small town called Holmfirth in Yorkshire, which those of us of a certain vintage will know is where Last of the Summer Wine was filmed.
I love that.
And actually, the cafe is still as it was around the corner. It's like a tourist attraction, and you can go and stand on Nora Batty's steps. So that's a bit of a niche reference if there's anybody in the US watching this.
I love that.
Don't write in. But so I'm a trained executive and leadership coach. I spent first part of my career in the software industry, second part in the health service, running regional then national bits of the National Institute of Health Research. And I coach teams, I coach leaders. But the thing that I really love is, and we've talked about this before, what do you call it? Settle on personal coaching, which is where the career meets life, meets personal development and all of that kind of stuff. So definitely not a life coach, but maybe where the business stuff sort of, if somebody's got to a certain level, they already know how to solve problems. They already know how to get stuff done. But sometimes people lose their connection with themselves and their work, and I love helping with that. So that's kind of what I do, whatever that is.
And because I know you, I can ask this question. You haven't always done this. It's only more recently that you've had your own business, isn't it? Tell me how you kind of finally made that decision to go all in, because it's a big step, isn't it, to go from being employed to actually go and sod it. I'm going to try not to swear today. This is what I'm doing going forward. So what was that tipping point for you?
There were two, really. So there's two real kind of pivot inflection points for me. So one was I worked with a coach, and I kind of got to do that by accident, because it was somebody who was in training and needed somebody to practice on. And somebody called Sue Marsh, who had a big effect on my life, because I don't really remember what we were talking about, but she asked me a question one day about what I wanted kind of out of life. And up to that point, that moment, if anybody had asked me that, the honest truth was, I don't really know, but I would have said, I want to be a CEO one day. And at the time I had that conversation, I was the interim Chief Information and Technology Officer for Clinical Research Network, which is a big national bit of the NIHR. So I was really close to that achievement, that goal. But I got to realize that it wasn't going to make me happy, because the words that came out of my mouth were, I want agency over my time. And I don't know if you've ever had a moment like that in your life where, because of the coaching process, and I know you're a brilliant coach, Phil, you'll have seen this happen to people. Sometimes you ask a question and the person just goes silent, and it's a life-changing silence. In my case, it was like these words came out from, I don't really know where. I'd never said them before. They weren't conscious in my mind, but the moment I said them, I couldn't unsay that. I couldn't unthink that. And the next realization was, I'm never going to get that climbing this ladder. Because somebody's always going to want to know, what time are you clocking on or clocking off? Even if you're the boss, and to realize that above everything else, status, security, like having my friends having a clue what I do, like all of that wasn't as important to me as waking up every day with agency over my time, right?
Yeah. And do you remember how that realization actually felt at the time?
It was a whole body thing. My mind went quiet. And that's interesting today. Like my mind was very quiet. It just went poof like that and then shut up. But my heart swelled, and it was a physical thing. Yeah, whole body. And then later on, I thought to myself, and this process took a while. At that point, I wasn't thinking about being a coach, wasn't trained to be a coach, but I knew that I had to find something else. And you and I are both basically hippies, aren't we? I think that
corporate hippie,
yeah. Hippie in a suit used to be my Twitter handle.
Unconventional aesthetic, I go with.
But I couldn't unthink that. I couldn't unfeel that, and so I guess I just opened myself up to like how I don't know how, but I couldn't stop wondering. I couldn't stop looking, and then a little while later, I'll make the super short story. By a series of accidents, somebody suggested I should train to be a coach. Within 2 days, I got the opportunity to somebody to pay for me to train to be a coach. Within a couple of days, I spoke to somebody who teaches people to coach. And the moment I did that, I was like, oh my God, this is my thing. But that wasn't a business. That was just training.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's such a good realization, because I'm sure there'll be people watching that have this image that success is that external figure that they portray to the world. And that's all about titles and money and promotion, being the CEO. And that's all superficial, because essentially success really is about partly that for some people, but for a lot of people, it's agency, how they think about themselves, personal growth, being better person they were than yesterday. So it must have been quite a difficult realization as well, to go from corporate Stephen to coaching. How did you manage that transition?
Right. I'm going to tell you as well, it's not easy, but people watching who might be considering working with you, it can be done. It's not an instant thing, but just to add a few layers to that. So I had a really secure job in a national bit of the health service, essentially unsackable unless I did something outrageously bad. I was going to get paid, well above an average national salary, secure, stresses and pressures, yes, but manageable. I knew what I was doing, had a good team of people that I worked with, etc., and an enormous mortgage, and 4 kids, and a wife. We'd both been single parents up until a few years before, blended family, all the challenges that brings up, etc. So there was no option to say, oh, I've had this realization, I'm going to go off and I'm going to be a coach, and figure it out later. So it had to be hard-nosed as well. I had to really work to figure this out. I suppose I feel fortunate that I have a background in innovation a little bit. And so I took an innovator's approach, which was to say, I know that I would like to make my living this way. I don't know how. So I started with just an experiment to test it. And the first experiment was, would anybody work with me?
Yeah.
And I found somebody that was willing to let me coach them. And then the next experiment was, could I get anybody to pay me anything? And I ran a workshop one day and I said, you pay what you want online. And I basically gave us a suggestion that it would be a £5 donation. I think 4 or 5 people showed up and one person paid £5. I would sell that for hundreds now.
Yeah.
But somebody paid me. And that meant also I had a mechanism for them to pay me. It was evidence that somebody would exchange money. And so that was the next experiment. Then it was, could I get somebody to pay me monthly? And I think the first person that I got to do that paid me like 50 quid a go, which, for my level of qualification, that's not a fair exchange. But that wasn't the point. The point was, can I get somebody to pay me? And then once you've got one person to pay you, you can say, I have this client, and so on and so on and so on. And it was just experiment after experiment after experiment until I had this. Again, the universe. I saw this thing online. So I was doing this part-time on the side. First of all, like evenings and weekends. Then I went part-time in my job. And then while I was doing that, I saw something. Somebody said, if you can make 60% of your salary monthly from your side hustle, there's no risk going all in. And a few months later, I did it once. And then the next month, I did it again. And then the month after that, I did it again. And I'd said to myself, if that happens, I'm going to quit, right?
Amazing.
Still a big decision, but So eventually then I found my way to the confidence to make the decision. Yeah.
But I love that though. And actually that 100% aligns with the work that I do, in that you became self-aware, you experimented, you looked for the evidence to support that new belief that you had in yourself, and then you reiterated the process. And that is basically what change is, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your approach. I mean, so obviously we work in the same field and every coach is different, but I think the way that you do things and we're quite aligned in our approach. There's a mixture of, so like you are better trained than I am as a coach. But we both like blend in a little bit of the spiritual and emotional understanding and life experience and stuff like that into what we do. But I know that what you do is like it is proper. There is theory behind this, but it's that alignment. It's like, can you first of all get in touch with who actually am I? I take that to a real extreme with people, to like strip people like completely of all the labels that they've ever accumulated. I don't think you necessarily need to go that far, but we change as we go on, and the people around us change and our circumstances change. So if every now and again you can find somebody like you to really help you audit, like really help you go, who am I? And then from that place, what am I called to do? Or who am I called to be? And if you haven't done that, then we've used this analogy before, and you put your ladder against the wall and you start climbing. And then at some point you go, oh shit, sorry. Oh dear, it was the wrong wall. Yeah. But this way, you make sure you've got the right wall or the right path or whatever your analogy is going to be, the right tree.
Yeah. But I love what you've just said, Stephen, because also, so what if I'm more qualified? That, again, that's just a label. I think personally, coming from the point that you do, your experience is completely invaluable to the people that you work with, because it's very difficult and rare. And fortunately enough, with people that work with both of us, we've been in that situation where we've had stuff come up at work. It's been put, both of us in a relatively senior position, and you've got to deal with it. And sometimes you look like you have to know all the answers, but on the inside, you don't, and you're lost. You're afraid. And that's why coaching is so valuable. So you mentioned there that it's like peeling the onion, getting right to the bottom and right to the nub of the issue for your clients as well. Tell me how you usually would work with a client.
So for me, I say to this, in fact, I said this to somebody this morning, the work that I do, and I think you're pretty similar, is I only want them to do this once. And then for the next 10 years, like, you shouldn't really need it again. Like, you might need some different advice, but what I start with is, I mentioned the word labels, and without actually taking somebody through, it's almost literally a meditation to help people to understand, when we say I, who is that? And we don't think about this, and we don't have time to go into it today, and I'm not, it's too much. But if you say I am, what follows that? And most of us fill that in with, I am a parent, I am insert job title, I am blah, blah, blah. And we can explore that and go, actually, that's not your identity.
Yes.
But sometimes we get a little bit too attached to that identity for reasons that are like culturally useful. If you identify yourself as a lawyer, say, it's handy if you are a lawyer, right? But it can also be limiting because that could change, could be taken away from you, or it could start to feel like a cocoon that is wrapping around you and you can't quite break out of it. So that's how I start, is I go take people right back. And it's actually a process that is usually peaceful in the end. And people realize that, underneath it all, I'm okay. There's all this external stuff that's making me maybe not feel okay moment to moment, but fundamentally I'm okay. And then that's a really positive place to start the coaching journey from. How do you do it?
Just touching on that, I'd love to know, if you ask that question, if anybody actually says something that's internal rather than external, because I would follow a similar approach. And a lot of the time people would come to me and say, on the outside, I have everything. I have an amazing job, or I have a fantastic family, I'm financially secure, but I've lost a part of myself. So when you ask them, they'll say, I am a mother, I work for so-and-so, I am, a parent, or whatever it may be. But they don't then say, I'm a really committed and devoted, whatever, that is internal. And they've lost that actual image of themselves and that identity. So actually, we probably start in a similar place.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I think then what you just did there beautifully as well, is like, without even thinking, is just reframing, isn't it? So there's like often I was talking to a client a day or so ago who's been through some businesses, and that they not quite achieved the lift off that they would have wanted. And the story this person was telling themselves was that was a failure, and then that was a failure, and that was a failure. And we just did a little bit of talking about it. Said, well, what did you learn? Well, I learned this, I learned that. I learned, what did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about business? So is that a failure? Oh, and he did that thing with, and then you get the silence and like, no, it's not. So, but you just did that beautifully there.
Yeah, I think that's there's a thing, I'm going to go into the science now, temporal discounting, when you basically focus on the present and you don't look longer term. So as individuals, a brilliant way to look at things is if you stretch the timeline. So you may not have achieved it now, but 2 years down the line, if you kept going, knowing the mistakes that you've made and reiterating and changing them, experimenting, trying new things and getting better evidence, 2 years down the line, you might be a success. It's just stretching the timelines. So yeah, sorry. So I know,
what's it called? Temporal?
I'm going to tell you the wrong thing now. I believe it's called temporal discounting. So that's when we both want for our clients, and I know we're on the same page here, for them to imagine a bigger, more fulfilling version of their lives, so that in your case, so they can get to that next level, which is the next program, isn't it? Next level you. But the problem is we focus on the present far too much without thinking about the future. So you're naturally going to limit yourself because you don't believe then that your future can be a bigger and more in-depth place.
I'm having one of those moments where I'm going, yeah, that is so cool.
But again, this all means that as individuals and for our clients, you have to get out of your own head. And there must have been time, Stephen, over the last, because it's only really been a year, hasn't it, that you've had the business, that you've kind of overthought things, had those limiting beliefs, possibly thought, because I know that I've definitely experienced this, oh, would it be so much easier if I just stopped it all, went back and got a job? That's not my future, I believe. But how have you coped with those when you've got into your head and you've needed to get out of it?
That's such a good question. Now, I suppose what I do is I return to the heart, in that going right back to that moment when it was a thought. So therefore it was a conscious thought. I want agency over my time. And then immediately I felt that in the body. And, we both talk sometimes about the somatic the lessons you can learn from what your body is telling you. I guess, I don't know whether this is something to do with the way that I'm wired or the experiences that I've had, but I'm struggling for the words, because it's more of a feeling that this is what I am called to do. This is what is true to me, is to do this, to try and build a business, to try and help people. I suppose I've never had a fixed idea of what that is.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite comfortable with adapting and pivoting and going, okay, well, this person needs this, or I've spotted an opportunity over there, or this person wants me to go and run a workshop and I don't know anything about it, but if they're going to pay me, I'll do it. I will be tactical about things, but on the day-to-day, the main thing, I have practices that I know bring me back into myself. So that might be meditation that you've already mentioned. I'm a big fan of breathwork. I get a lot from running. I go trail running, and I know there's a thing that happens to me. Unfortunately, I've got quite a capacity for endurance. So I have to run for like an hour before this happens, which is frustrating. It'd be nice if it happened after 10 minutes, but
horrible problem.
But it means I have to spend an hour in nature, right, running and being with breath and so on. And and just anybody watching that's into like fitness, I think there's something about zone 2. You know about zone 2? There's something about zone 2 that is like genuinely spiritual, I think. There is something about that. If you can, for those of you who don't know, there's these heart rate zones, and zone 2 is how you train for endurance events. You get your heart rate to a certain level in a certain band, and if you can stay there, your body has a capacity to go for a really long time. But it also brings you into your breath in a rhythm that is not unlike meditation practices. It does stuff to your physiology and so on. So I meditate, I run, I do breath work. Sometimes I just do what I call a long sit.
Yeah.
We
talked about this. Tell people listening what that is.
So I go, meditation can feel a little bit like contrived to some people. I've tried different modalities and found ones that work for me. But I just go and sit in a quiet place with no time limit. And I just go and see what comes up. And sometimes I've done on one occasion in the last year for 3 hours, sat on the sofa.
Wow.
And I had some real fear came up. I ended up having a conversation in my mind with the teenage me. But it was necessary at the time. I was so in my head, and I was trying to rationalize things that I couldn't. I was like saying to myself, if I do X and Y and Z and A and B and G and F and G, and then that will generate X amount of money or clients or whatever. But that's not how it works.
So is this helping you to get out of your head then?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was so lost in there. Now, it's almost, who's the phrase? There's a famous quote, isn't there, about like the world's problems, could be solved if man could learn to sit quietly in a room. I forget who it is, but it's, and why don't we do it, particularly in 2024? Well, our attention is grabbed everywhere, isn't it, by our phones and Netflix and the busyness of life and the kids and all of that kind of stuff. So it feels, I think it's a radical act to go and sit and do nothing.
And it's also something that we can all do, isn't it? Just to sit. If anyone's listening who are thinking, oh, that's all right for you, Stephen, you know about meditation, you know about breathwork, and you can do all this stuff. I'm just really swamped by my thoughts. What practical things would you advise that are sort of more of the everyday to help people just take their thoughts and change how they feel about themselves?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say you are the expert in this, so I want to hear your answer in a minute. But first thing I'll say, right, is it's a truism. If you don't have time to meditate, the solution is more meditation.
Yeah.
Because we live in a very rational world, right? Because of technology and because like systems are so well organized to everything is like a production line. Everything has a rhythm that comes from the ones and the zeros that computers are built on. But we're not machines. So when we get a little bit swept along by all of that and by our calendars and the things bleeping on our phones and all of that sort of stuff, you lose connection to yourself.
Yeah.
And we all do that. I still do. I'm not Buddha. Like I have to remind myself
like him.
all of the time. But if you are feeling like you don't have time, I would do something really, really simple and something that I used to do when I still was in like the corporate world. And I can remember I'd be going to the office and like I just commuted and my brain was buzzing and I'm like, oh, I've got this work to do and the kids and that's how it felt to me, was like in my head.
Yeah.
What I would do is slow down physically the walk to wherever I was going, whether that was to go for a coffee or get to the office. And like, let's say my walk from the car to the office was 10 minutes. I would turn that into 15. And, 5 minutes being a bit late, it doesn't make a lot of difference. But just the act of physically slow down. How slowly can I walk? And it's almost like reverse engineering it. And you'll know more about the mechanism here. To me, it's just instinctive. By slowing down. And I guess it's a form of mindfulness, maybe. But anybody can do that. Just when you go to the bathroom, after you've finished watching this, walk slowly and see what it does, right? So that's the first thing. Journaling, write your thoughts down. And journaling is such a loaded term. It's like, oh, you're supposed to do it this way, that way. Grab a piece of paper and write down what you're thinking. And then chuck it away if you want. It doesn't matter, but that can get you out of your head. And then really simple, if you can slow your breathing, and there's really easy ways to do it. There's box breathing, there's other stuff, but the one that I find the simplest is you just take a really long breath, hold it for a moment or two, and then breathe out really, really slowly. And you can be doing that in the room with your kids or in a meeting, and you will physiologically change the way that you feel.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, perfect. And I think it goes back to what you said near the start of our conversation about the labels. So if you say to somebody meditation, breath work, journaling, they'll be thinking, oh, what certainly I would have done in my corporate job. I thought mindfulness, I just didn't have time for it. But if you turn around and say, ask yourself some questions, take a few deep breaths, and just sit still for a minute without your phone, usually people go, yeah, I can do that. That seems fine. And I love, one of the things that I try to get my clients to do is last thing at night, I'm not going to say to them do journaling. I ask them to ask themselves 3 questions. So it is, what went well today? What could I have done? What didn't go well, basically. So what didn't work out? And the last one is, what could I have done differently? So straight away, you're training your mind to see the positive. So what went well? So that's the gratitude part. And there's so many studies around gratitude. The second one is just allowing them to be a bit objective about what didn't go well. So they taking the feelings out of it and just write actually the fact. And then the last question, what could I have done differently? You're then training your brain that the next time a similar situation comes up, you've already thought it through of how you would have handled it. And if you do this every night, it really will make a huge difference to your life, because you're helping your future self by figuring out problems that come up in advance. But it is hard when you get stuck there, because your thoughts, you don't know they're going on most of the time. And 80% of them are negative, aren't they?
Well, yeah, because from a evolutionary point of view, a lot of what's going on in our minds is looking for risk all of the time. It's like, is that dangerous? Is this dangerous? Is that dangerous? Is this dangerous? And I'm not an expert in this, but for me, like the modern world is geared up to be about your head. It's all about logic. It's all about in what we think are facts. I think it sounds like a conspiracy theorist there, but we get we tell ourselves stories in our minds, and sometimes those stories are negative. Often they're negative, and we can also rehearse that. So the more negative stories we tell ourselves, the more likely we are to keep telling ourselves negative stories, right?
Yes, yeah. Negativity bias, isn't it?
Absolutely. Whereas if we think about the heart, and we go and just think like, what does the heart mean to us? It means things like love. It means things like connection. It means things like that. Now, a lot of people don't know that there's almost as many, like, am I using the right term here, neurons in the heart as there are in the head. So the heart is almost like a brain. So when you connect with that, you open up a whole other way of experiencing yourself and the world, which balances this out a little bit. And I've gone a little bit esoteric there, but actually, no, that's neuroscience.
Yeah, because you'd know more about the heart, though. Obviously, I know about the brain, and you want those neurons and the synapses between them to fire together in a way that works for you, and not in a negative way. So tell me more about that.
So for me, let's join up these stories. When I had that moment right at the beginning, I was like, oh, I know what I want. I want this thing. For me, if I just like check in with where is that, it's here. It's I said this at the start, it's my body is saying this, okay? Now, I guess in the West in particular, we're not that used to listening to that. And listening is an interesting word, isn't it? Like opening ourselves up to it. I think culturally it might sound like if you lead with your heart, that you're like soppy, or you're like romantic, or you're not serious, or whatever. Whereas the truth is, if you can really connect with your heart, it opens up a power within you, because you asked me a question about like the journey from there to there. Now, there's been many days when I don't know what to do. I have been told so many times by people that I thought cared about me, you're taking a big risk, you're really stupid, you look you look ridiculous online. And well, I've been told a lot of things. So to keep going, it's only by connecting with that. If I listen to this, it will be like, oh, well, I need to keep them happy and people don't like me and blah, 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 blah. All that negative stuff that's social and so on is all in here. But when I connect with this, I feel powerful and I feel like I can work so hard, which I have done. I can access energy, I can access so much. And I genuinely believe it connects me to other people. If I speak from this place, people feel it. There's an emotional connection. They won't know what it is. And I'm not conscious of it necessarily, but people feel it and they want to be connected with it. And so good things happen, right? You attract stuff. Wow, that was a bit of a monologue, Phil. Sorry.
No, not at all. And I love that because your thoughts, they're up here, they fill your head, but your emotions, that's in your body.
Yeah.
And obviously your emotions are so much stronger than that, but it does suggest though that your subconscious thoughts actually are supporting you in a positive way.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Different discussion. But I always think like, basically your thoughts, that it's a blank canvas and you color them in whichever emotion you want to feed your thoughts with. So by opening up your heart, you're coloring in your tapestry, I guess, of your life with a positive color rather than that negative one.
Lovely. I like that. That's almost like is it synesthesia, where you get like colors and you can see emotions or something like that? But yeah, I agree. It's like it is an opening up, and yeah, and there is a kind of genuinely, it feels like power, but it's not power over anything, and it's not about status. It's just about life. It's like living.
Yeah.
What's that word? There's a word that I picked up recently that I knew the word, but not in this context, was congruence.
Yes.
Which is like, can my head be congruent with what my heart and maybe my gut as well is telling me? And so I was trained, I've got a degree in software engineering. And I worked in the software industry. Then I worked in clinical research where it's all about facts and process. And so on. So I've been in my head a lot. Like there is a right way to do it. This problem is solved or not. But when you say, I want to live differently, I want to experience life differently, you can't count that. There is no guide or roadmap or anything like that. But by doing it the other way around, and I know this is like your mind wheel thing, what I try to do, because this works well, I have quite a good ability to process things, to learn things, to connect things. But that doesn't take you anywhere that meaningful, I don't think, unless the destination and the choices are coming from the heart. And then you use the head to figure out, how do I do it?
Yeah.
But it's not is it the right thing to do is not coming from here. That's coming from here. But then the how, use this in service of that. Never said that before.
Yeah, I love that though. So how would you say that you help your clients then who are really stuck in their head and they're maybe having some of these negative emotions and they're therefore not being able to move forward? How would you help them with that?
So similar to you, it goes in phases. So the first one I think is just like helping people to reconnect with themselves, because most of the people that I work with, they come from like a corporate or business world or similar. Sometimes it's like public sector or whatever, but they're people doing serious jobs. And so they might have been on the odd yoga class, they might have downloaded the Calm app or whatever, but they haven't had time to go deep on like the spiritual traditions and neuroscience and all the rest of it, like you and I geek out on. So it's, you have to meet people where they are. And so there's a little bit from my point of view, just like, how far along the path is this person? Have they genuinely been exposed to nothing? Or have they, like I say, have they done a bit of yoga? In which case, if I draw their attention to what the breath might have done for them in that class, they might, I could use that. I already have some tools. and we help, figure out what their like toolkit is. So, and I don't have an easy answer to that one, because always like, this, you meet people where they are and then you help them along that path. So some people are already a reasonable way along. Some you've got to start at ground zero. And with them, I do this fairly frequently at the moment, literally sit and teach them how to do a 2-minute breathing technique and say, right, I'm going to set you a target. See if you can do that 5 times tomorrow. And I know all that does. Well, A, they can use that technique forever.
Yeah.
But B, it will get them out of their mind just for a minute. And then they start to think, oh, hold on a minute, I quite like the way that this feels. Aha, then we can take them along the path a bit further.
Amazing. And it's accountability as well, because then a lot of the time they'll come back and say, well, because I knew I was going to speak to you, I had to do this.
Yes.
But tell me about some of the transformations you've had for your clients, Stephen, because I should imagine they are incredible.
Do you know what? I'm bad at this side of it, because so the hero of the story when you work with a coach like you or I is the person. And so really they need to tell that story. And I like hearing them, but I get my satisfaction. And it's lovely when somebody says something nice, but I get my satisfaction from doing the work. So I don't need the validation. And so I'm bad at like recording it, whatever. But here's a couple of things. So I had one person a few months ago who like day one, lesson one, because I have this kind of like structured program, messaged me within 20 minutes saying, I've realized I've been doing X wrong all my life. The story I've been telling is wrong, right? After 20 minutes.
Wow.
Just because this person hadn't been exposed to that way of seeing themselves. And there was like a label that they'd attached to themselves that just wasn't serving them anymore. So that was nice. But then, hey, 6 months more work to help you live this, help you figure out, well, if it's not that, what? And that's been a lovely journey with that person. Here's a great one. Somebody who went through that process, the early bit where I'm helping them to understand who they are, came back to me a month later and said, Stephen, I've realized I'm already happy.
Wow.
And I stopped working with that client after 1 month. And normally I work with people for 6 months, because what she'd done was she'd maybe got a little bit lost in the Instagram world of like, I should be this, I should be that, I should be the other, and was considering actually becoming a coach and giving up her job and so on. And I ask people to look at their lives, look at themselves, look at their family, look at their community, look at their work, and then look at how they keep themselves well. And she looked at all those things and went, actually, I really like myself. My family's lovely and they live around the corner. I'm really connected with my community and I like my job. I just need to adjust a couple of things so that my lunch break, I use it a bit more better. And that was that. So brilliant, job done. I'm happy. Well done. And she didn't have to radically change her life. She just had to see it differently. Sorry, can you hear that banging?
I was wondering what it was.
Digging up the road outside. They weren't when I sat down. But, there's a couple of examples. Oh, and my favourite one of all time, somebody said to me, and I did record this one, she said, it's like learning a new way of life.
Oh, brilliant.
Kind of cool.
Well, and that's amazing, because we get stuck, don't we? We get stuck in what should be. We get stuck on what everybody else is doing. Whereas if we can detach from that comparisonitis, which I call it, our lives would be so much better. But I love the fact you mentioned the hero's journey there, because I know, Stephen, that you've launched today a brand new program as well. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so Hero is like, shout out to Danielle Clark as well, who's been working with me on branding recently, who came up with the name of that. So I guess by accident about 6 months ago, I ended up online a little bit talking about men's issues. Wasn't in my plan at all. I won't tell a long story, but I started to realize that a lot of, I guess, men of my kind of like generation and class were struggling and not able to voice that, because we're not kind of culturally set up for that at the moment, for reasons that are understandable, and I am not against or anything like that. But I realized that when I started to lean into talking to my friends and some male clients and peers, and I just asked a couple of questions, you realize there was a lot of hidden, they were a bit lost, okay? And at the tip of that is the rates of suicidality in men in the middle part of life are shocking and getting worse. Now, that obviously, that's not what I do. If I ever came across something like that, and I have referred them on for other help. However, beneath that tip of the iceberg, there's a lot of other stuff. So I started to lean into it a little bit and realized that I was getting this kind of real interesting mixture of very positive and very negative feedback. And so I thought I would try and build something that was to try and help men in the middle part of life who might have lost their way a little bit. And so that's what it is. And it's kind of like launched today, no fancy videos or anything like that. It's just ready to kind of attract people into, it'll launch properly at the start of October. But thank you for asking about that. And it's a cool name, isn't it? Hero.
Amazing. And I think, yeah, at any one point we're somewhere in that wellness continuum. So we could be good mental health or going towards the other end of the scale. So having someone who goes, actually, let's start here. Here is where you're at. Let's get you better, and moving up towards better mental health and better self-actualization is really important. So what next for you, Stephen, for your business with this? Where do you see it going? What impact do you think Hero is going to have?
I have no idea. Do you know what? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So I am in the fortunate position that I am like making a living out of what I do, and we've not mentioned the whole ikigai idea, have we? But for anybody that doesn't know, it's a Japanese concept. It means if you can do what you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and you can be paid for, that you're going to find fulfillment and happiness. And I feel like I am very fortunate that at this stage in my life that I have my ikigai. I love what I do. I have put a lot of heart into what I've designed with the Hero thing, but maybe nobody wants it. And that's fine, because I learned a lot by doing it, and it has helped me to reflect on myself and so on. But I guess there's three things that I've got going on. I never answer a question like straightforwardly, do it, but I'll try. Three things going on. So I run these programs that are online. Two of them now. One's called Next Level You, and one's called Hero, and they run for 6 months. And they basically take people on this journey from being a bit lost or unsure of what they're doing to hopefully in a position where they are like thriving in every aspect of their lives, and off they go. And that's fantastic. So that's where my heart, I absolutely love doing that. But I also make a living out of doing corporate work. I run workshops for corporates and like classic executive coaching, that kind of stuff as well. And then the new thing is I've just taken a lease on a room in the building that I'm in. I've been using this kind of like co-working space, but it's like a proper room. There's going to be like a consulting area, so I can bring clients in, do like one-to-one and even like small groups. So I'm not very far from Leeds, Sheffield, Manchester. I'm definitely doing a pitch now. And so I can almost do like a corporate away day, but and there's like there's a meeting space. There's even like a yoga space, and I can do my videos, and I can have my own space, and I can sit and meditate in my own office, shut the door. So all of that's going on. Where it'll lead, I don't know, but I do it because I love doing it, and I hope that it attracts people and they want to be part of it.
And from all of our conversation today, the fact that you're doing this because you love what you do and you have a purpose will mean that anything is going to work out, because you're going to carry on doing that regardless, aren't you? And I love that. And especially as at the start, you use the word agency. So I guess one of the final questions is, if people feel like they're lacking that control over their lives at the moment, they're lacking that agency, what would be your advice for them to do next?
Hire a coach, either you or me.
No,
but honestly, right, why is coaching having a moment now? The reason is, and it's not just coaching, there's counseling and psychotherapy and psychology and people trying to form groups, it's because we've become a bit atomized in the West. We've become a bit disconnected from ourselves and from community and family and so on, because we've built the modern world. And I'm sure you've heard me say this phrase, like, you can feel that is awful, terrible, the world should be this, it should be that, blah, blah, whatever. It ain't going to change it. It doesn't change because you don't like it, right? And there's a couple of things that I find helpful to remind myself. One is, you should never say you're part of it. You should never say you're stuck in a traffic jam. You should say you're part of a traffic jam, right? This society, I built it as much as anybody else. The bits that I like and the bits that I don't like. I am part of it. It's not somebody else, it's mine. And the way that I see it has something to do with my mind and my heart and what I choose to do. So don't feel like somebody's going to come and rescue you, or that the world is magically going to change if you don't decide to change yourself. So that's the first thing. But then we don't have the maybe networks that we used to have where we would get that kind of support. But coaching is an amazing process. The reason I am a coach is because of a coach. Now, I don't think I've ever coached anybody that's gone on to become a coach. They've gone on to do all sorts of different things or stay where they are and do it better. But they've learned so much about themselves. They can accelerate that process of becoming who they want to be. So I don't mean it flippantly. Phil is an amazing, amazing coach. Any coach that's any good will let you speak to them for like half an hour or an hour first. And it's usually called a chemistry session or a discovery session. And a good coach will tell you honestly whether they think they can help you. And they will tell you if they can't. But people who approach me, if I don't think I'm right, I'll go. I know loads of coaches, so I'll introduce them to somebody else. So you shouldn't get a hard sell from a coach, but honestly, it can really, really change your life. So I'm not going to apologize. Go and hire a coach.
I love that, and it's about, I call it radical responsibility for your own life, isn't it?
Yes.
You can either let somebody else make the decisions on your behalf and take control, or you can decide yourself to take action. And that's where you and I come in, isn't it?
Absolutely. Is that thing, isn't it? Like that phrase that does the rounds often, that like, what's happened to you is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't have a lot of time in my own world for feeling like a victim. Like I won't do it. And I know, well, maybe I've just said that out loud now as a professional, white, middle-class, middle-aged man, blah, blah, blah. But you know, I've been through some stuff.
I think we both have. And actually, I think our experiences don't necessarily define us. They make us who we are.
Yes.
And so my final advice for anyone listening is to remember that we've been through a lot, and you can't necessarily see, to go back to the start, the external success. But once you've got through things and you've got resilience, you can then change yourself and go on a completely different journey as well. Thank you, Stephen, so much for talking to me today. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Can we do this again?
Yes.
I've known you for...
We've done this, haven't we?
You are really good at this. And
thank you.
I do a bit of this myself, the other way around, and I've been interviewed by a few people, but you are very, very good. So I would like to see more of this with other people, and if you will have me back, I would love that.
Yes, definitely. It's because I used to work, my first job in the city was in recruitment, and my favourite thing was interviewing people because I'm really just nosy. And I love finding out about them. So no, it will be coming more. For anybody who's still here and listening, thank you so much for coming today. I hope you've got something out of the session. We'd love to know your thoughts. Please message Stephen or me directly if you've got any questions. And also, now that Stephen said it, what should our next conversation be about? Because as you can tell, Steve and I have got a lot of stuff to say. whether it's worthwhile or interesting, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, we'll try not to swear all the time as well. But yeah, thank you so much. We've really enjoyed it, and have an amazing weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Stephen.